We have a bill by Mr. Allen. Senator Allen, thanks so much for joining us.
It's good to see you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members. And I'm here to talk about SB 637, which has to do with suction dredge mining, and it seeks to address a recent court ruling which found that California's regulatory program for suction dredge mining violated the Federal Supremacy Clause and the 1872 Mining Act because the Department of Fish and Wildlife doesn't have the authority to fully mitigate all the environmental impacts as directed by the legislature, and thus we could not issue permits and lift the moratorium that's been in place since 2009. Now, this bill empowers the State Water Resources Control Board to use its regulatory powers under the Federal Clean Water Act to address the water quality issues associated with suction dredge mining. This addresses both the gap in regulatory authority and also clearly ensures that California's regulatory program be in line with federal water protections. We know that suction dredge mining can cause serious environmental impacts. According to a 2003 study by the Water Board, the power equipment used by suction dredgers to vacuum up the stream beds causes can cause a plume of mercury-laden sediment to travel downstream, which is harmful to water quality, public health, endangered species, and cultural sites. And in a letter to the Department of Fish and Wildlife from 2013, the Water Board said that recreational suction dredging as a whole has a disproportionately greater effect on mercury resuspension, which is like agitation and redistribution, when compared to other natural events or human activities. In 2011, the USGS reported that suction dredge miners mobilize and change toxic metals such as mercury that are currently buried under rocks and mud in our rivers. This action makes mercury more available for transformation into toxic methyl mercury. So when the DFW issued its final environmental impact report on its suction dredge mining regulations in 2012, the department recognized that it did not have the authority to regulate impacts on public health, water quality, or cultural sites, and thus couldn't issue permits that guaranteed those protections, despite the legislature's requirement that it do so. And they made the point at that time that other agencies, such as the State Water Resources Control Board, have jurisdiction over these impacts. So in January this year, the San Bernardino Superior Court ruled that federal mining law preempted the department's regulations of suction dredge mining on federal land since the department couldn't legally issue permits. The court commented that the state's laws related to suction dredge mining needed clarification. So by requiring the board to regulate the discharge of pollutants into waterways resulting from suction dredge mining as it regulates every other discharger under the Federal Clean Water Act, this bill, SB 637, addresses the court's ruling directly. It closes the gap in California's statutory framework regarding suction dredge mining by both giving the appropriate agency authority to deal with the water quality impacts and also by ensuring that the activity conforms to both state and federal protections. This is even more important now as our state is in the grip of this historic drought. We need to protect water quality. And I have with me here Izzy Martin from the Sierra Fund and also Josh Saxon, who's a council member from the Karuk tribe, who will speak in support of SB 637. And I should also mention that we had an opportunity to meet with the opponents. We accepted several things came out of those discussions, including a more kind of really explicit instructions with relation to public engagement, public participation in the regulatory process. And we were happy to include those changes into the bill. Izzy.
Thank you, Senator Allen, and thank you, Chair Rendon, and members of the committee. My name is Izzy Martin. We're the sponsors of this SB 637 at the Sierra Fund. Our work is aimed at trying to protect the water quality in the headwaters of the state of California. Our region serves 2/3 of the state's developed water system comes from our water. Over the past 5 years, I've been studying mercury fate and transport at the Malakoff Diggin State Historic Park, once the richest and largest hydraulic mine in the world and now a state park. It's estimated that almost 10,000 kilograms of liquid elemental mercury was used at this site alone to aid in the gold recovery process. I'm going to reference 2 peer-reviewed pieces of scientific literature, both by USGS scientists. The first is the effects of sediment and mercury mobilization in the South Yuba River and Humbug Creek. The second is mercury and bioaccumulation in fish in a region affected by historic gold mining. The first USGS study tested the effects of a suction dredge mining on mercury at a hot spot on a hydraulic mine-impacted river, the South Yuba. This study estimated that 100 hours of dredging with a single suction dredge could exceed a year's worth of total mercury loads. There were over 3,000 permits issued annually statewide prior to the moratorium in 2008. Obviously, not all suction dredge miners are lucky enough to have access to a hotspot contaminated with gold and mercury, but that is the desired target, to find a hotspot where there is gold buried at the bottom of the river, and then with it, there's almost always, in our neighborhood, legacy mercury that was once used in hydraulic mining. So the amount of mercury released by a suction dredge miner depends upon where they are mining, how contaminated that area is from mercury, and how many hours they dredge for, and the size of the nozzle. Once the silts and clays are contaminated with mercury and liberated by the dredge, they can stay in suspension for a very long time and travel great distances, where they can then redeposit in downstream reaches or reservoirs. And particulate-bound mercury can then be methylated and incorporated into the aquatic food chain. The impact that the released mercury has in the environment depends on when it is released, how much is released, what forms it is released in, and where it lands. Most importantly, what we've learned from these peer-reviewed published studies is that seemingly low levels of mercury in sediment can become dangerously high levels in fish through a process called biomagnification. These elements are all elements that the State Water Resources Control Board can actually regulate. Size of the nozzle, timing of the dredging. These are all very appropriate sorts of activities that a State Water Resources Control Board water quality permit could invoke, and in this way protect the water quality of the people of the state of California who rely on the Gold Country for their water. I respectfully ask that you support this bill today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ayuki. My name is Josh Saxon. I'm one of 9 council members on the Kuduk tribe, second largest tribe in California. Now I know how my tribal members feel when they're in front of me on the council. So I want to talk specifically about fisheries and about cultural areas and the impact to those by small-scale mining. We have in our river, on the Klamath River, I live about 200 yards from the river on a little tributary called Camp Creek, where my family's lived for approximately 10,000 years. And we rely on our fishery for food, and we still do to this day rely on fisheries for our food. And the impact to water quality that mining has in our rivers is cumulative effects can be very detrimental. And you'll read in the report there's many scientific facts and scientists who will speak to that. But in terms of our tribal members, my constituency, they're very concerned about their fishery and the impact that suction dredge mining has on their fishery. And that's what I want to relay to you, is that tribal trust species like salmon and steelhead and trout are very important to us, and we rely on those, and we still do rely on those. The other specific impact that suction dredge mining has on our culture is in our ceremonial areas. We have one place in particular called Inam, and it's at where we begin some of our world renewal ceremonies, and I personally have been involved with these ceremonies since I was a young boy, and we personally have had to ask miners to leave so that we can conduct our ceremonies. And that's a very uncomfortable position to be in. And as a tribal leader, as a ceremonial leader, my stance is that the impact of suction dredge mining and small-scale bank mining, small-scale high banking, anything that you're doing on the banks of the river that affect what I do for my religion is detrimental. And so the tribe and myself ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. We've had 2 support witnesses. Now we're going to, as the chair indicated at the outset of the meeting, everyone else who is in support will just state their name, affiliation, and again, at this point, everyone should be in support. And then after, we'll allow opposition to speak.
Jennifer Franklin, East Bay Municipal Utility District, in support.
Thank you.
Kathy Cole with the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California in support.
Thank you.
Good morning, Christian Molina on behalf of the Sierra Club in support.
Thank you.
Tim Sloan, Pacific Coast Federation of Fishermen's Associations, and we're in strong support of this bill.
Thank you.
Charles Watson on behalf of California Trout in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Bill
Now-
Dodd, late for the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Dodd. I have two main opposition witnesses.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Morning.
My name is Eric McSimic. I'm here on behalf of Suction Dredge Miners. I'm a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. Did about 8 years with Army Special Operations Command, U.S. Special Operations Command, did service in Iraq. Thank you, sir, for your service in Iraq. Today I'm here as a Suction Dredge Miner and as a Director of the Western Mining Alliance. I would like to speak in opposition to this bill. I'd like to clarify that the Suction Dredge Miners are completely opposed to this bill in whatever amended state it may be, and we are maintaining that opposition. I would like to clarify, Ms. Martin said that scientists had conducted a study that she relied on to make her statements. She really ought to be more forthcoming. The scientist who did the study was a donor to the Sierra Fund, which Ms. Martin runs, as well as on the Board of Advisors at the same time he was doing the study, which essentially dams suction dredging. The Carrick issue certainly is valid, and suction dredge miners have been working with the Carricks through the settlement process, and I think even Mr. Tucker would agree. Between December and January, we're very close to working out issues with the Carrick tribe that would have, I think, resolved the conflict up on the Klamath. We had it down to about 12 specific. The two issues I want to talk about is cost and Mercury. This bill has been presented as no cost, and that's not accurate. There is going to be a CEQA triggering event here. The Water Board acknowledges that this bill requires that there be an environmental review, so you do have the CEQA cost. There will be a litigation cost to this. When the original dredge ban bill came through, I don't know if that was accounted for, but being a director of an organization that has been in this litigation now for over 3 years, and of course 6 years with the dredging ban, we will litigate this. We have to litigate this. This is pulling guys' ability to make a living with no due process of law. And to date, the state has, last we did a FOIA, Fish and Game alone has spent $1.5 million. I don't know what your AG's office has spent, but every time we go to San Bernardino, they have 2 attorneys there, so I would imagine it's significant. But we have to litigate this, guys. I mean, we have 2 U.S. Supreme Court cases that say we are not dischargers. One of them is the L.A. County Municipal Storm District. We are not dischargers. Now, I appreciate the Senator's concerns with water quality, and certainly we're all for it. But the regulatory cost, to say this regulatory cost will be borne by the suction gold dredgers, there's only 3,000 of us. And right at the start of this bill, or in the start of his explanation, he outlines there's $600,000 in cost involved with upfront costs. There's only 3,000 of us. We can't pay $3,500 a permit. Secondly, there's a human cost to this, and if nothing else, I want to get across what the cost to people has been of this. Some people do make their living on gold mining. And, you know, to put names to him, a guy here today who is also with the Western Mining Alliance, Rick Eddy, he made his living on gold mining. He lost that living with no due process of law. SB 637 is another end-around due process of law. Steve Tyler made his living gold mining. Keith Walker, who is a pro se litigant in the ongoing litigation, made his living gold mining. And Keith Walker is an exceptional case. He made his complete living on this suction gold dredging. Single father, widower, raising a 13-year-old daughter. When the ban came about, he really has lost everything. And if nothing else, consider the cost on people. He just last year had to send his 13-year-old daughter away to live with his son who's in the Air Force, and he's living out of a trailer and working at the Sonora County dump. Prior to that, he was earning a living. He wasn't harming anybody. Where he dredges is really within the bathtub ring of New Melones. And his last $1,500 was just spent on filing updated papers and litigation. Keith is the human cost. Suction gold dredge technology was invented in California. It started here. Keene Engineering is the largest manufacturer of gold dredging in the world. And this is killing them. Proline mining, same thing. It was invented here. It's raised here. But the more important point that everybody wants to talk about is mercury. And in the explanation of the bill, there are two errors I want to bring your attention to. The 2003 pilot study didn't evaluate what happened with the suction gold dredge. The study was to determine how much mercury a gold dredge could recover. An unmodified gold dredge, an older version that we used, the study found that we recovered with an old gold dredge, no modification, 98%. That's pretty darn good. Current gold dredge technology is likely over 99%. The second one about this mercury plume, there is no study anywhere that has found we discharge mercury in any amounts, and I have every water board study mercury here. This is the 2003 study, 98% is what we recover. This study from 2007 from the water board, there is no reservoirs or lakes in gold mining country that measured above EPA criteria in fish, and that is the standard for measuring it. This study here, which was released in 2013, Contaminants in Sportfish statewide survey, finds low concentrations throughout gold country. There were no rivers where we mined that exceeded U.S. EPA standards. Water board, again, this isn't just the Western Mining Alliance talking. A draft study that they just
Can you
released
start to summarize your comments, please?
for the basin plan, there is no relationship between gold mining and mercury levels. And finally, this idea that if we don't mine it, that it's somehow going to go into fish. This mercury, this study done last year, the mercury is traveling downhill every year. That mercury will continue to run downhill. We do not release mercury. The Porter Cologne Act would classify us as mercury reduction. I ask you to vote against this bill. It harms people. And if you're going to harm people, where is the benefit? OEHHA, the California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, not one single person in California ever been harmed.
Thank you very
and
much.
I'll pass it to my...
Hello, my name is Chris Georgie with Miners Assembled. We are a constitutional assembly of individuals and groups that are working for common cause. I would like to address quite a number of issues. If you turn to the center of the booklet which you were given, you will see a couple of quotes which were almost given verbatim again by the testimony earlier. And there is a image of the river at low flow versus at flood stage. The concept that it is possible to, in 100 hours of dredging with something of 4 inches in diameter, move anywhere near the amount of sediment that is transported by that river in a single hour is absurd. If you take a look on the next page, when we are in the water dredging and we remove from a hot spot 98% of the mercury, the concern that the environmentalists have stated is that the 2% is then transported downstream. Well, that 2% would be transported downstream anyway, along with the other 98%. When you then have the fires that we have been having regularly and a landslide happens upstream of a hot spot that has not been dredged, if you have perhaps 100 kilograms in that location, that sediment, if you have, say, 1 metric kiloton, will end up with 100 parts per million concentration of mercury, which is, I believe, what was my percentage here? We were at 18 parts per million is the screening level. You would have a 100 part per million, or more than, what is that, 5 times the concentrations. If it is dredged and there is 2 kilograms remaining, the result would be a 2 part per million, which is 9 times less than the CHHSL threshold levels. When we're out there dredging, we also are not removing just the gold and mercury. We're removing large quantities of lead, iron, just general trash. There's been a single individual that removed in a given day, I believe it was over half a ton of lead. That would be the little pamphlet there, and you can see that there are 7 5-gallon buckets filled with lead that was taken out of the Salmon River. I would like to address with fisheries. One of the issues that was brought up is that the impact to downstream fisheries. It has been brought to our attention that this year there is such a concern because of the low water and the fact that the dams have reduced scouring that the river is now inundated with parasites that are on worms. And it says that the problem isn't as bad in years when the river is cooler and runs higher and faster in winter and spring because the current picks up gravel and cobble on the stream bed, disrupting the worm's life cycle. And this is actually from the Reading Record Searchlight, which the Kuruk tribe's leader for environmental resources, Craig Tucker, commented on that they didn't believe that this was even as severe as they were expecting to see it get. The other information that you would be to take a look at in the study, which has been cited by the proponents and has been passed around, if you take a look near the last page, it actually states that the mercury they were concerned about releasing downstream during dredging was from dredging pure globs of liquid mercury up to 0.5 kilogram in liquid form with the dredge. And they said that rather than using a dredge to suck up the liquid mercury, you may be wise to simply use a turkey baster or a hand suction device for the liquid before proceeding with normal operations. And I'll be available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to this bill? So we had the senator was the main presenter in support, and then he had 2 support witnesses who spoke at length. The opposition has had 2 main opposition witnesses. I'll allow one more person to speak for a little while, and then everyone else, in which can be if you belong to an organization or what county you come from, and your position on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Rick Eddy. I'm political director for Western Mining Lice. I'm also a professional dredger. I've done it for many years. I appreciate what the senator did by amending the bill, and we're working with the Water Board. We requested that we be involved if this bill should pass in negotiation with the Water Board on permit and all that. The problem with it is simple. I mean, the Water Board sent a couple letters over to the judge in San Bernardino. Why, I don't know. And they stated right in there that they were going to require us to get a discharge permit that's really doesn't fall under our insignificant impact, okay? And they also said they're going to require us to do water testing and all kinds of real expensive results that we can't afford. So I have a copy of the letter here. Put to you. There's statements in there that are false, and the Water Board is made it very clear that they are going to do whatever they can to overregulate us and kick us out of the water. So I am not in support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can hand your letter to the sergeant over at the table. Thank you. So we've now had 3 main opposition witnesses. From now on, please just give your name, where you come from, and that you are in opposition to the bill.
My name is Joe Woldhouse. I represent the East Bay Prospectors, and we oppose the bill.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Steve Durham. I'm from Napa County, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you, sir.
Jerry Butler from Yolo County, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Dale Meyer, East Bay Prospectors. I oppose this bill. One thing that hasn't come up is this bill makes it illegal for me. I can't transport my dredge in the back of my truck without coming within 100 yards of.
Thank you, sir. So you're in opposition to the bill. Thank
you. It makes me break the law.
Thank you very much, sir.
Melissa Fernandez. I'm a gold miner from Coarse Gold, also a conservationist, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you, ma'am.
David Fernandez, Corscold, California. I'm a miner, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
My name is Rich Georgie. I'm a miner and a fisheries biologist, and I do not support this bill.
Thank you.
Robert Cutting, and I oppose this bill, and I'm from Solano County.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Robert Smith from Contra Costa County, and I do oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Richard Hussey, I'm a prospector for 30 years, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
John McPherson, Sacramento. I'm a miner, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
I'm Randy Harrelson. I oppose the bill.
Thank you, sir.
In 2009, I
You
have my
oppose the bill,
receipt.
correct, sir?
Absolutely. I have my
Thank you.
patent pending numbers right here. I had an invention for a gold dredge that worked.
Okay.
And in June 2012, 2009.
Thank you, sir. You can
It was banned.
you can hand that to the sergeant, and he can give it to us.
Time to get back in the water.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Chad Breeden. I'm from Sacramento, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
My name is Ed Ebbett. I've been a miner for 30 years, and I'm from El Dorado County.
Thank you. And you oppose the bill, correct?
I oppose it, yes.
Thank you.
I'm Cindy Burchard, and I'm with the Motherlode Goldhounds in Auburn, and we oppose this bill vehemently.
Thank you.
Gary Shaver, representing Pioneer Mining Supply out of Auburn, California, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Ray Dodds, miner, 30 years. I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Placer County.
Thank you.
Martin Colson, Contra Costa County. I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Tom Parker, I'm from Nevada County. I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
I'm Howard Elder, Sierra County, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Gary Logue, and I oppose this bill. I am from Sacramento County.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to this bill? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this bill? Do we have questions from the committee members? Mr. Daly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to first worked a lot on Mercury. Who's going to have dredging or did have dredging in it. And there are some areas that have Mercury, but this bill is going to be a statewide ban on dredging. And no?
No. It just gives the water board a regulatory power. In fact, on those rivers that don't have mercury, the presumption is that there won't be a problem at all with regards to this, because the issue, the real issue that's being addressed here is those rivers that have mercury present.
And so, have those been identified? Which ones do and which ones don't?
Yeah, we discussed this. But we had a big meeting with everybody, including folks from the water board, and the kind of the consensus was that those rivers that this is only an issue that will impact those rivers that they know have mercury, and they've got.
It has not been delineated to our knowledge.
What has the
which mercuries do and do not have.
Let's let the senator finish. If the assembly member wants to ask a follow-up question, he'll do so.
So have the rivers, have they identified which rivers or streams have mercury in them and which ones don't?
That's my understanding, but I know we've got a couple people here who could give some more detail. That was certainly my understanding in the meeting we had.
And if you want to hear from the opposition, you're welcome to ask them to do so, assembly member.
Can you restate the question?
So they're going to be required to get a permit to do dredging from the water board. That's the intent of this bill. That's correct.
The intent of the bill is to have the water board look at suction dredge operations and determine whether or not they need to be regulated, whether their discharge meets the Port of Cologne Act, and if so, then they will need to get a permit.
Okay, and so have some rivers have mercury, some don't, or some streams. Have they identified which ones do and don't?
Correct. They have identified what are called under the Clean Water Act 303D listed water bodies. There's maps of them. It's very easy to find these maps. They are online. Often the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment has found that there's a correlation between those maps that show the 303D listings and the very high amount of mercury in the fish tissues. So, for example, where we live, every reservoir in the Gold Country has been listed for being impaired for mercury, and there's a fish advisory on every single water body in the Sierra and, in fact, the state on mercury, but those are somewhat different issues. But where we live, the fish are hotter than the fish in the San Francisco Bay.
Right, but there are some rivers
Absolutely.
in other parts further north that don't have
Right.
mercury impairment that would not be impacted by this.
I wanted to just be clear, because in other places the reservoir listing is around from atmospheric deposition from mercury. Where we live, it's from this
Thank you. We're going to allow the assembly member to
Thank you.
ask questions.
The point is that there are some streams and rivers that don't have mercury, and 303D listings are not just because of mercury; they're because of heat and other reasons that those rivers are listed. So we want to make sure that we're talking about the right issues when we're talking about why they're impaired. So I think the question's been asked or answered, and I have actually toured some of these rivers and looked at some of the mercury contaminations. But anyway, I just want to make sure that there are streams and rivers that are, it's not about mercury there. It's about other issues why they're listed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dowley. Ms. Gaines, and then Mr. Mathis.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for bringing this forth. I come from a different perspective. My dad lives in Downeyville. He was the local dentist for Sierra County, and he was paid in gold nuggets up until very recently. And I think that the local county dentist continues to be paid. My dad has a weight balance, and in fact, in our wedding, everybody who participated got a little vial of gold nuggets. So I understand the plight of these gold miners. I mean, this is their livelihood, and we can't mess around with their livelihood. I understand that there's mercury in the riverbeds from the 1800s, goes way back. So I see these suction dredgers as actually cleaning up the river for us. They're doing good things by cleaning up, bringing it out. Now, what they do with the mercury is the question. The mercury that they extract from the riverbeds, what do they do with that mercury? And can you answer that for me, please? In opposition.
At the moment, there is no comprehensive program for returning of that. At one point, there was a program which I believe Izzy Martin was part of instituting back in the 2001, was it? That actually encouraged the miners to bring in and drop off mercury. In, I believe it was 3 months, they collected over 220 pounds of mercury, and that was then properly disposed of. They have made the assertion that it is a, quote, Class 1 hazardous waste to be disposed of at Kelman City. However, I cannot find any schedule which lists mercury anywhere on a Class 1 anything. So I'm not sure where they come up with that. It's very simple to separate from the gold. You use a retort, which you apply heat at one end, goes through distillation, is deposited in water, and what you end up with is 99.9% clean mercury after 3 trips through, which is a commercially viable mineral. And mercury is actually a locatable mineral itself, meaning that mining mercury cannot be considered a waste. It is a product.
Okay, so this confirms my assertion that you're actually cleaning up the riverbed by extracting this mercury. The question for me is, should we not be looking at ways that we can bring forth this program? That it sounds like it was successful, and maybe we should be putting forth the energy toward that.
Yes, so Mr. Chair, if I may, your point's well taken. There's no question that there are some beneficial aspects of this activity in terms of mercury extraction. And in fact, one of the things that came up during a Senate hearing when we were in committee a few months ago was that some of the counties have been much better than others in terms of providing collection centers that collect the mercury and that dispose of it in a clean way. We did find out that a lot of miners have just bottles and bottles of mercury sitting around in their houses, which I don't want to be the fireman have to deal with that when there's a forest fire. So there's no question, and I'd love to work with you on working with the counties to deal with mercury collection and proper disposal. Now, there are 2 different types of mercury we're dealing with here. We're talking here. You're talking about the congealed, the more solid mercury, if you like. The problem here is that there's also this mercury resuspension issue that's at play, methylized mercury, that much smaller bits of mercury effectively that end up getting agitated and sent down the river as part of this process. So all this bill seeks to do is have the board look at this issue, and we're not here to adjudicate the science in the legislature. The board is tasked with that, and the miners will come to them. They'll bring up all the mitigating factors. They'll say, look, there's so much positive impact here. There's some negative impact there. And then the board makes that decision. If they can make the case that there's an environmental net benefit or it's neutral, then the activity would absolutely be permitted and allowed to proceed. Certainly in the case of Assemblymember Dolly's question, in those rivers where there's no mercury present, there's no need for regulation. So all this does is give to the board the regulatory power to examine and weigh the negatives and benefits associated with mercury with regards to suction dredge mining.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mathis.
Just to follow up,
I think
really
Mr. Mathis is used to that.
As you were.
One final comment, Senator Allen. I look forward to working with you on that. I think that's where I would really like to help and work together on what we do with that mercury that they so successfully clean up our riverbeds with. Thank you.
All right. Well, Assemblywoman Gaines kind of stole some of my thunder in those questions. First off, I'd like to address the issue with the tribal lands and the sovereignty. I mean, to me, it's tribal land, it's sovereign. We shouldn't have people out there mining, dredging, doing anything on those lands. I think that's a separate federal issue that needs to be addressed to tighten up where people are allowed to go with mining for those certain things, because I know there's certain things within the federal regulation that do say, okay, this is public, but it's on sovereign land. It's where there are burial sites, and I think that needs to be addressed, and I know that's a separate matter.
Could I address that?
Yeah, I've got several other things on the list, but...
Okay. Let's allow Mr. Mathis to enumerate all of his questions so he can, share them first. Thank you.
All right. That's the tribal one. Like I said, Ms. Gaines already hit, I think going into the disposal fact, looking back at what was being done and figuring out what happened with that. I mean, I see this as an environmental gain, not a loss, because if you're cleaning up, you're pulling the trash out, you're pulling the lead out, you're doing all these other things, I don't see how that's going to be harmful to other species downstream and things like that, because if we're collecting these things that are contaminants that can cause harm and disposing of them properly, that's a benefit, not a loss. And that definitely needs to be looked at. The other part of that is, getting into the agitation that goes along with this. I mean, we've got these predictions of an El Nino year, and flooding is going to be crazy. And I know it was brought up on the opposition side. What's the difference? I mean, if we get severe flooding, all that's going downstream anyway. And that's natural causes. So, I mean, it's kind of a what is worse, and when you have flooding, that's not cleaning it out. It's just going down. Let's see here. Back to Assemblyman Dolly's question, I think more specifically, and I'd like to know, where is it posted black and white, this one's good, this one's not? Because if we're moving this direction, and this is to pass if it is, then it needs to be clear, it needs to be posted, and currently there's tons of disconcernment. It's not. And if we're going to do something, it needs to be black and white. The Water Board's already gained severe powers with other legislation such as SB 88. This is just more going towards what is allowed to decide on what's going to be done with the waterways. And then, Senator Allen, you and I have worked well on several things, and I like working with you. What would you envision the issue they've been doing for generations, and with the show of cause, the information that the colonel's brought up, we're showing, hey, there is an environmental benefit to dredging that's going to help us out in the long term. So what would that permitting process look like? Because to give authority to the water board, they need to have a clear cut, this is what it's going to be, before it gets put over in the hands. Because once it goes there, then you have regulators who are going to say, well, I think it ought to be based this way. And we have a clear case of the conflict of interest in these studies that shows, well, I'm going to do a study because this benefits me. I mean, anybody can go out there, and this gets into the whole pseudoscience argument of, I can go out there and I can say, you know what, I want to do a study that's going to show this. And you can doctor that. We've all done science fair projects. And it's not that hard to go, I want to see which nail's going to rust.
Okay, so number of different questions. Couple things. Let me address one or two of them, and then I'll pass over to the representative from the Carrick tribe who can talk about some of the tribal issues, and I don't know if you have anything you'll want to mention. So first of all, we did take an amendment, kind of getting back to this question, as part of our discussions that said that, for those rivers that were not 303 delisted, that the water board can just issue a letter saying that they don't need a permit because those are not mercury impacted waters. On this issue of the storms, you're right. I mean, that's really a timing question, and ultimately, this is why we need, a scientifically based board that is there making decisions, overseeing the process, making sure that things are done safely, and with a mind toward water protection. There's a moratorium on suction dredge mining.
With a scientific-based board, I mean, when we look at these things, and we do this on several other things that we do, I mean, we pull people from industry in on that panel in that decision-making process to ensure that all sides are being looked at. Yep. Is that something that you're working into this?
Absolutely. In fact, we've also taken amendments to really ensure a long and robust public engagement process, so that all the folks who you've heard from today will be able to make their case to the board. And there's a lot of science, and you've been presented with some of it. I've had the chance to to work with Chris over time. He's great. I mean,
so you're guaranteeing that they would have a spot on the decision making process.
They'd be able to weigh in. I mean, obviously the board membership is the board membership. But they have to ultimately kind of hear the case and make the decision they think is that the science leads them to. But certainly the bill has put in place protections to make sure that Chris and others will be able to engage and present their case. But ultimately, in the end of the day,
don't hold against me my faith in the board's decisions.
Okay.
When it comes to
I mean, one of the things. I hear that. I mean, I obviously come from a different part of the state. But I continue to be really grateful to the board for its work in protecting water quality when we're all so dependent upon high quality water for everything we do. I understand there's some tensions there. That's a broader conversation. But for better or for worse, we've tasked the board with taking care of the critical water quality questions that we face through industrial, agricultural activity, et cetera. And ultimately, we know there's an issue here. That's why the state issued a moratorium in the past. That moratorium has now been called into question on federalism grounds. We've got responsibilities under the Federal Clean Water Act to protect our local water, and that's what this bill is working within the framework of the Clean Water Act to make sure we've got some sort of procedure in place.
So we're gonna just have to cut this off. We'll go back to you if you want to continue having a conversation,
Absolutely.
but we'll go to Mr. Bobna now.
But just
did you? Yeah, I'll allow for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all the questions have been asked.
Well, I just made the point. My name is Craig Tucker. I'm a natural resources policy advocate for the Karuk tribe. I have a PhD in biochemistry. And just the one point about the tribal lands, understand that a lot of tribes, including the Karuk, although the Karuk are federally recognized, don't have a reservation. So there is no federal law that says you can't come on Indian land to do this thing. The fact that the Karuk tribe's ceremonial areas are managed by the Forest Service is a big problem. So federal law doesn't really step in and prevent miners from impacting Karuk ceremonial sites.
I'd love to work with you and the tribes further on better protecting those lands.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Dobovnet.
I also share the sentiments of my colleague from the Central Valley about making sure that we're giving more protections to the tribes in our communities to make sure that they're not having these kind of invasions on their property. That being said, Mr. Allen, I will tell you, I got inundated with calls from across the state, and I frankly couldn't answer this. Is there any lake, river, stream in your West LA Beverly Hills district that this affects? Is there anyone drudging in your area? Is there any, I mean, it just seems like when they call and ask, why is the West LA senator, meddling in our area? It's a legitimate question. So I was just curious to see what your response to that would be when they call me.
Assemblymember, all of us in the state, and we've all, you're serving on this committee, I serve on the water committee over on the Senate side. We all know how extraordinarily important and difficult the current state water crisis is, how important water quality is for everybody. And, that's what this is about for me, for my personal involvement. And we've got people from the area who've been really concerned about this for a long time.
I understand why the tribe would be concerned. I'm just concerned. I'm not concerned. I'm just questioning, is there anywhere in West LA that has
this is about water quality for me. And I said this at the, at the meeting that we all had. I said, that's my bright star here. This is not about trying to jam up your industry. If this is, if we could figure out a way to make sure that we are protecting our water resources while allowing you to do your work, in those rivers that don't have mercury, if they can make the case that there's a scientific benefit associated.
No, I see all that,
Yeah.
and I support the measure. I just, when you get these calls, it is, and we did reach out to the office to see.
All right, thank you for that line of questioning, Mr. Williams.
I want to say that I'm sure there are people in West LA that get mercury poisoning from fish, just like all over the state. So mercury poisoning is an issue because this stuff migrates, and that is fish both from the river and methyl mercury that gets down into the ocean affects everyone in the state. So I think that it's fine for folks that can be concerned with it from all parts of the state. I want to just make a motion do pass to appropriations and say that this is an important issue. I think the opposition fear is a little over the top. This is not a ban on dredging. This is a legitimate regulation in areas of high mercury, and it's about time that the state board look at the water quality issues that are created by underwater dredging.
All right, Mr. Rendon.
I want to thank the author for bringing this forward. It's an important environmental bill. It's an important water quality bill, and I'd like to second Mr. Williams' motion.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Allen, would you like to close?
I really appreciate the robust conversation, both that we've had and also that we've had just now in this committee. And I really do continue wanting to work with everybody on the various issues to make sure that this is something that will actually work, will clean up and take care of the core water quality issues that brought me to this issue in the first place. So I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. Let's call the roll.
Do pass to Appropriations Committee. Levine.
Aye.
Levine, aye. Bigelow. DeBobney. DeBobney, aye. Dolly. Dolly, no. Dodd. Dodd, aye. Gaines. Gaines, no. Garcia. Gomez. Harper.
No.
Harper, no. Lopez.
Aye.
Lopez, aye. Mathis.
No.
Mathis, no. Medina.
Aye.
Medina, aye. Rendon.
Aye.
Rendon, aye. Salas. Williams.
Aye.
Williams, aye.
That has 7 votes. You need 1 more. We'll keep the roll open. Thank you, Senator.
Let's keep talking. I'm running the committee, but come welcome me.